Well, it's been a few weeks, maybe a couple months, but we are back and hockey is around the corner. It's gearing up for the New Jersey Devils. I'm James Burley, joined by Daniel Rebane. This is Puck on the Parkway, season two, officially underway. I guess we took a bit of a break. You can call it a break between seasons, and it was something of a break between the New Jersey Devils season, gearing up for 2024-25, which looks to be a bit brighter than the one they just finished off with. So, first and foremost, normally we catch up with each other at Red Bull Arena or one way or another, but I haven't seen you in a matter of months. I've been super busy. I haven't gotten out to a New York Red Bulls game in a minute. So, Daniel, tell the folks at home how you're doing, man. It's good to see you.
Hey man, I think we all needed that break after that last Devil season. So I'm glad we're back. The hype is real this season coming into 2024-25, and I'm ready to get started. Yeah, actually me too. I haven't been to the last couple of Red Bull home games, so should be back out there this weekend. I don't know if you'll be there, but yeah, man, just grinding away, and I'm just glad that hockey's back because football's already dead. So
Football might be already dead if you're a fan of either of the New York teams. We don't have to talk about that at all, and we won't because this is a hockey podcast. So that's where we are going to keep it. Hockey is back. The Devils rookie camp is underway. They've played a couple of games and have looked pretty darn good doing it. Absolutely battering the Sabres and Senators, to name a couple. But we're going to start on a bit of a more solemn note because this is Puck on the Parkway, runs through New Jersey, and perhaps the greatest New Jersey hockey player of all time we had to say goodbye to, and a dramatic surprise and one that was really hard to accept for a lot of people. And of course, Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau both passing away due to a drunk driving accident. They're on their bikes at their sister's wedding back home in South Jersey, and just an absolute devastating story. But we're not here to talk about that. I guess we're here to talk about some of his legacy and what he'll leave behind in terms of his stamp on the game, not only in New Jersey and not only in Calgary and Columbus, but across North America and across the world. One of hockey's most exciting players, and this is a really sad one for all of us here. And yeah, I guess it's just time to pay respect to an NHL legend who was taken from us far too soon, Dan.
yeah, man, I'm not gonna lie, this one really hurt because I remember that night where all the news broke. Originally it was posted by someone and then it was deleted. So I was talking to my friend. I was like, oh, this isn't real. So I just went to sleep, not thinking much of it. And then that morning, I get woken up by my dad, and he's like, "Yeah, Johnny Gaudreau passed away," and it was just shocking. I was like, "No way, man!" Because like you said it, like Johnny's just you know, other than being a great hockey player, he's such a nice dude. Obviously we don't know him personally, but what he portrays was a great guy. Both him and his brother Matthew at their sister's wedding that was going to be that next day. It's just sad to see. I remember watching him growing up. I mean, everybody remembers that BC goal in the national title game. uh, I remember the World Juniors tournament where the U.S. won gold. That was like the first time I noticed him, and that's where he got his nickname for me, Johnny Hockey. And his time in the NHL was great, man. Like such a great player to watch. And it's tough to see him go so early in life.
He played growing up for the Hollydale Hurricanes in South Jersey. The Hollydale Ice Arena just renamed this week to Goudreau Rink, aptly so. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Goudreau family, Johnny Goudreau's wife, who announced that in addition to their infant child, that another's on the way.
Yeah,
And quite frankly, if you've been drinking and you're thinking about getting in a car, just call an Uber. Just
yeah.
don't do it. There's just no reason for senseless recklessness and for people to continue to die from drunk driving. And I think that, I mean, that's all that we can say about that. The suspect is still being held in custody, and rightfully so, for what will be the worst mistake of his life, and ultimately took away the lives of two great men who should still be with us. So, rest in peace to Johnny and Matthew Goudreau.
Yeah.
and for their legacy to live on in New Jersey and around the world. So on that note, let's bring in some of the positive news in that hockey is back, and that's why we're here to be talking about the hockey that is being played on the ice. And for the start, I mean, let's talk with some bigger names before we get into the nitty and gritty of what rookie camp has looked like for the Devils, and so far so good, I would say, for New Jersey. I guess we can start with the most recent news, although there's a couple things that we got to get to, and that's Dawson Mercer. It's a name that's been on everybody's lips all summer for the Devils. They did a lot of good things this offseason, most of which we were able to get to before we concluded and took a little break in that, bringing in Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon, Jacob Markstrom, and the like. But I think this one is a big one because this kind of rounds out the forward core. We haven't seen big moves come in terms of the Devils' forward core. Maybe you make a case for Paul Cotter and Stefan Noesen towards the bottom end, but Dawson Mercer is a guy who hasn't missed a game for 3 seasons and continued to be, you know, on the top of the list in terms of impactful middle six guys for the New Jersey Devils, and has had moments in the top three. It seems that they're really looking forward to getting this short-term deal done. 2 years or 3-year deals are both on the table, and that's not the deal breaker. It's a matter of the money, according to David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period. So, Dan, I mean, have you heard anything that I don't know yet? Is this close to being resolved, and what should we expect in the coming weeks for Mercer and the Devils?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm surprised it's gone this long. I thought, this would
I'm getting
be
nervous, man.
yeah, it was like I was like, maybe they'll get it done once they get all their free agency stuff going on. And they did that with a couple of RFA guys, and Mercer was the last one, and you would have expected that one to wrap up quickly because with our cap hit, not having much money of about like around 4-ish kind of million, maybe just above that. But yeah, I think we all kind of expected a bridge deal, 2 to 3 years. I would say probably 2 years is better for Mercer just to get to that big extension when the cap finally like kind of maybe blows up once the new CBA comes around. But yeah, I think 3.5, 3.75. I think that's exactly where New Jersey wants to be. And obviously, Mercer is going to want to go get as much money as he wants. But I think just for this bridge deal, I think if he just takes like 250K, half a mil less, he'll get millions more in the future once he has his actual deal coming out. Especially if he takes the next step and starts producing 50 and 60 point seasons consistently in those next 2 or 3 years whenever he signs.
Well, I think with the departure of Tyler Toffoli mid-season, um, there's a real incentive for Dawson Mercer to say, "Hey, I'm going to be getting consistent top six minutes now. I'm not third line guy anymore. I'm going to be a guy that you need for scoring instead of are just pleasantly surprised by he's a 45 point guy, he's a 20 goal guy. This is a guy that they now need to be a key contributor. Looking at this roster, so I think that kind of goes to his advantage in terms of, hey, if you're banking on me." Why don't you pay me? Or on the flip side, we trust you, so you should give us some trust back by negotiating a good deal with us. The way I see it, this is something that is shockingly going on too long. I'm not saying it's a disaster in the making, and I think they'll get the deal done. Clearly, he's a restricted free agent, but clearly both parties want him to remain with the Devils. The matter of it is, how much money is it going to be? I can't see it being a dramatic number, especially because it is a bridge deal. I'm just surprised that it's taken us this long to get to the rumors. We heard nothing for a really long time, and now it's only for the past week or so are we
A day
hearing,
before camp starts, by the way.
yeah, and a day before the proper camp starts, really, that the deal is closer, that they're working on it, and the language here on Pucks and Pitchforks and from the Fourth Period, grinding away at a short-term contract. So that is good news, but it is still a little bit surprising for me. I think they get it done within the week, and we're not talking about it so much anymore. I think
Yeah.
he's done enough to earn a longer-term deal, if I'm being totally honest. But at what price point is it must be obviously that's the discussion. But
They just don't
has
have the
he
money to do that.
they don't have the money to do that for one. And if you give him a long term deal in 3 years, does it then look like they're underpaying him like crazy because he's taken two big leaps as an NHL forward. And I think that's a really big possibility considering just how consistent and effective he is as a player. So that's something that they're going to have to figure out, and they're working around the clock, it seems, to do so. This is a little bit more pressing, what we have to get to, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's now becoming a bit of a concern, but it's one that I'd like to say, hey, just take the time to get this right.
Yeah.
Luke Hughes was spotted at the Michigan Texas football game with a sling around his shoulder. It was Gianni NJD was the first to point it out and said, "Hey, is this something we should be worried about?" And then the following morning, the Devils post an update that Luke Hughes is going to be out for between 1 and 2 months, it seems. And it's not the first time a Hughes who plays for the Devils has had an issue with that part of his body, and that's a little bit scary because we know the blue line was a major, major, major point of focus for Tom Fitzgerald and the Devils this offseason. The Devils' defense was atrocious last season. This year, they made these big improvements, but they might be starting the season without not just Luke Hughes, because if you remember, Seaman Nemec at the Worlds this summer did go off. Was it? I believe it was at the Worlds.
It was
Did go off
Olympic qualifier.
Olympic qualifying. Excuse me. Did go off with that shoulder injury, and we've heard literally crickets out of out of his camp. We have no idea what his situation looks like. So there's a real chance that the Devils start the season without their two uh, blossoming young defensemen. And that means that the door is not only open for two guys to come in and stamp their place as the seventh D moving forward for the Devils, but it also means what does this blue line do without those guys to start the season? Could this be a real hamper on the Devils' success in October and into November? And if you're like me and you say, get this right, make sure he's okay, do you give Luke Hughes all 8 weeks to get healthy? And if it's a long term type deal for Seaman Nemec as well, what defensemen are we going to see on this blue line, Dan?
Yeah, I think, obviously, seeing Luke Hughes with a sling at the Michigan Texas game, not only does Michigan get embarrassed at home, I gotta see Luke Hughes injured. And yeah, he's gonna miss all of October. The hope is that he probably gets back, you know, November, like he's on the ice, skating, and then he'll make his debut early November. But yeah, it's gonna be a tough miss. But I say, at least that you get that out of the way now, right? Get the injury
Right.
out of the way now. It's not happening in the middle of the season. So you know what, take as much time as he needs. He probably takes that 6 weeks total to get healthy. And yeah, you brought it up. I mean, the Hugheses with their shoulders, man. Like what? Everything else is perfect with them, and then you got their shoulders. So whatever he was doing in summer training with his brothers, don't ever do that again. That's all I'm gonna say about that. And then the Nemec one was a bit more scary when it happened because obviously he goes headfirst into the boards and kind of messes his shoulder up a bit. Nothing has come out since then other than he was gonna come back to New Jersey and get evaluated. So hopefully it's nothing and he doesn't have to get any surgery or nothing. I feel like if there was surgery needed, we would have heard something. It's probably just they're just being cautious and they want to see what he does when he gets back into the gym and everything with the veterans reporting tomorrow. So that's gonna be, hopefully we don't see both of them missing from the opening day lineup. But I mean, you brought it up, that kind of opens the door for Nick DeSimone, Santeri Hadika, and then Jonathan Kovacevic, who we got from Montreal. If Nemec misses any time, I think he steps in instantly on that right side, and then you got DeSimone and Hadika battling for that left-handed shot. So battles are gonna be happening this training camp, and it's gonna be interesting to see.
I think that's almost it's definitely not a good thing for the injury to happen, but I think it's
No,
the incentive of competition amongst these younger, more unproven defenseman, I think is a big plus side in many
Yeah,
cases. I thought Hataka in his limited time at the NHL level last year proved to be a reliable defenseman. I think
capable. Yep.
yeah, I think Nick DeSimone is a guy that we'd like to see more of before we make judgment, but he's on the older side. He's turning 30 this NHL season. Topias Villain is another guy who I thought has a really good upside to his game on the younger side. I mean, we talk about any of the younger guys. I mean, Seamus Casey is one that's obviously everyone wants to talk about. He's
Mhm.
next up really to join the fold in terms of this group of guys. And then another name that you were hammering the drum for, KHL wise, is Daniil Masul. And I think that he's a guy who, again, just because of how much talent is in this young blue line pool, is a name that gets forgotten about.
Yep.
So I think Kovacevic, because he's got that NHL experience, is probably among the top guys to get top 6 minutes on the defense at the start of the season. I think maybe Hataka and Kovacevic could be the two guys that we see fill in for Nemec and Luke Hughes should they need it at the start of the season. But by no means is that set in stone or anything. That's just two guys talking. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of new things we're gonna learn about this squad that we just haven't seen yet. And the first month, October of the Devil season should be interesting, let alone because of a couple of games in Czechia to open things up. So let's keep this chugging along. I think that can bring us pretty nicely into a discussion about the rookie camp so far. If you want to start it on the blue line, we can, because Seamus Casey is, of course, at the top of that list in terms of everybody being impressed with performances specifically. But looking back at those score lines against the Senators and Sabres, I mean, it couldn't just have been one guy. Who has been standing out for you, Dan, so far?
Well, if we're gonna talk about on the blue line, I'll bring up in goal first, Isaac Poulter. I mean, you know, from coming out of nowhere last year in the AHL to, now he's gonna be a solidified AHL guy with Nico Dawes this year. I think he's an interesting name to watch in these next coming years, man. Just talk about a guy going undrafted to the ECHL, now up to the AHL. I mean, he's starting to pick up some steam, and more people are starting to hear about it, and that's all we could ask for is just keep on developing and see what he does this year. He played good in the second game. Sounds like I didn't watch the full game, but it sounds like he basically stole that game. Um, so that's good to hear. We all know about Seamus Casey. Mikel Deity played good in the first game that I watched against Ottawa. But a name that kind of stood out a bit was an invite, and that's I don't want to butcher his name because it's a long one, but it's Igor Buranamwe. Buranamwe, you know,
That
enough.
sounds good.
It's a very long name, but he stood out pretty well. I mean, he's a 6'5" defenseman, left-handed. Um, he's aged out of the QMJHL this year, so he'll be playing university hockey up in Canada this year. But for a guy that's undrafted, getting a look in rookie camp this year. He had 2 assists in that game. I believe was it the last game? I think against Boston. He had 2 assists.
This morning or
Yeah,
yesterday morning.
yeah, he had a really good one to outlet, I believe, to Chase Stillman for his goal. You know, for a guy that's just getting an invite, you don't expect much, but he kind of stood out to me along with Vlin, Casey, and Dia, like the guys that we kind of knew were already going to be like names we'd hear about in the AHL this year. I'd say Igor stood out, and maybe he has a good season in university hockey up in Canada, and they bring him back because we've seen players get signed from all over the place. So maybe he gets an AHL deal sooner rather than later. But that's just a name to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, just a couple other guys that I'll highlight. I mean, Mikal Diote getting first pairing minutes for most of
He was
those
really
games.
good. He was really good.
Looked really good next to Villain, another right-handed guy that could make a jump moving forward. And I think Xavier Perrant is a guy who has
Yeah,
I
on the
know
forward
just
side.
as on the forward side. I know we were talking D man. but I wanted to highlight him just because I love the way he plays the game. I'm not saying that he's going to jump into the NHL and be impactful immediately, but like, ah, man, he just reminded me of Steven Gianta. I'm just gonna say it, just a little scrappy centerman who could, on his best days, play on both sides of the ice. But this guy is physical, man, and he plays hockey the right way. Um, Call me old fashioned, but seeing a 5'8" guy out there throwing the body around at 100, he's built like me, man. I feel represented out there for the first time in a long time for the Devils. So he's just a guy that I wanted to point out. I
Hey,
think
we
that
brought him up last year. Remember that
we
when he
did, we
started going
did.
off in the AHL early in the year.
And that was a guy who admittedly wasn't on my radar. You beat me to the punch as you often do in these things, Dan, but I'm firmly on the wagon. I think he's a guy who can be a big part of a bottom six, really at the NHL level. I don't think he's quite there yet, but I love his game, and I think it can translate to the NHL level, just not at an incredible clip scoring goals. So with that said, I think there's a lot to like. Ultimately, they fell to the Boston Bruins in that game. But at the end of the day, these aren't about scores. These are about guys giving it their best and maybe making a name for themselves to make the jump into the NHL ranks. Is there any guy individually that you see in this rookie camp that you're thinking should bypass a year of playing at either the amateur level, the university level, and jump to the NHL right away? If you could pick one, and if not, if you have more than one, I think Isaac Poulter is a name that is interesting because well, the Devils still have a little bit of depth in that area in terms. I mean, Akira Schmidt is gone, but Nico Dawes is a guy who has shown that he can be good at the NHL level, and he's going to be spending all, if not most, of this year at the AHL level. So, if you want to talk Poulter, I'd be happy to.
Well, you brought up Perron. He was a standout for me in the forward group, but there's two other guys that stood out to me too. And obviously, it's going to be really hard to make this team as a forward this year because
Hmm.
I think we have a lot of spots kind of already filled or kind of automatically placeholdered for certain guys. But hey man, people have been trying to throw Chase Stillman off the wagon for a while
Yeah,
now, but I mean
like them.
he's just starting to grow into his own game, man, and I really do think he could be a guy that's in that bottom six going forward. I think he brings that scoring touch. Like he won't put up like 50 or 60 points a season, but he could be that guy that maybe gets you 20 goals in your bottom six. Playing on the power play in front of the net. Um, you know, every team's looking for their Zach Hyman. I'm not saying he could be Zach Hyman, but he brings attributes that Zach Hyman brings to the game. And if he can continue developing that in the AHL this season, I think he's a guy to look out for next year to make that bottom six because I really do like what I've seen from him these last couple of years. Even though he's not putting up gaudy points, I mean, everything else about his game, he's doing well, and that's what you look for, man. First round pick, obviously you want him to be a point guy, but not every first round pick develops into being that high scoring guy. You need to round out your roster any which way. So him playing with his physical ability, he showed his scoring touch with 4 goals. Even had a really good assist this prospect camp. So I'd like to see what he does in the full camp in these preseason games. But the second name is a guy I was talking about last year after we drafted him. That's Cam Squires, and um,
Yeah,
I really want to say this with like take this with a grain of salt, but he really does look like another version of Dawson Mercer. That's what I was seeing last year when he was playing in the Q. He's got that dog in him like Dawson does, man. He scores goals. He can one time it. He could play on the PK. I mean, he plays the same way that Dawson Mercer does. And getting this guy where the Devils did, I mean, this could be another gem in the hat of Tom Fitzgerald. So, he had a great first game. He didn't get any other points the next 2 games, but I think he showed people what he can bring to the team once he officially graduates from the Q after next year.
yeah. I think Squires is another guy that was on some people's radar early on and has only proven people right, such as yourself. Once again, I got to give you your flowers where you deserve them.
Thank you,
There's there is a lot of good stuff from even in the Bruins game. I thought
hmm
there was, I mean, the puck movement it looked like, I wanted to say, even though it wasn't the same players, it looked a lot like watching the 2022-23 Devils. And admittedly, the coaching isn't all that important or implemented, I should say, at this point in the season, at this stage of these rookies' careers. But if this is the type of hockey that Sheldon Keefe wants to be playing, this high octane, super speedy, get the puck up the ice, stretch it with your wingers, win the neutral zone type of game, I think that should be the Devils' MO. I think it was the Devils' MO when they were at their most successful. And yeah, there's a lot to have liked about this early development.
And I just want
And
to say
yeah,
just one
go
last
ahead.
thing. I mean, I think Sheldon Keefe was talking or was said to have talked about this to his team that he wanted the rookies at least. He wanted them to show their physicality and they showed that every game they were real physical, especially in that first game that I watched. Like I watched almost a full game. They were everybody was throwing their body around. Like this is
Mhm.
a rookie camp and these guys are just throwing it around. We had a fight. So I just like what I saw from these rookies, and if they could take what they were bringing on the ice and bring it to the veterans, I like where this team could be heading. So that was another positive I took out of this.
Well, let's move it along. I mean, we didn't have too much to get into because let's face it, we're not into the thick of the season yet. We had to get the maintenance things out of the way. Luke Hughes injury, Seaman Nemec injury, question mark, not even sure. Mercer contract
Yep.
and the rookie camp. And now there's a couple of other names that you wanted to highlight. Some of the PTOs. I mean, here's another guy who could be really be in the mix for that blue line spot should he make the team, and Jakobs Borrell, who, while scapegoated often for his blue line antics for the Bruins, is a guy that has some NHL experience and could be in the mix for filling in some of the minutes there. And then another name who has a chance to be an AHL goalie at this level, and potentially be a taxi guy should there be injuries among the goaltending ranks and challenge Nico Daws in that regard, is Michael Hutchinson. These are two guys who are not household names in the NHL by any means, but if you were a big hockey fan, you would have known these guys from being at the NHL level for a while. And I think they both have a real shot at becoming New Jersey Devils and getting contracts, perhaps two-way contracts for both of them, but still, the way it is, I think these are two positions of need at the moment in terms of getting just extra guys to fill some skates there. And I don't hate it. I think another name that you pointed out that we'll get to is a guy you'd like to see fill out the forward core a little bit more. But let's talk about Zboril and Hutchinson, and do they offer anything to the Devils? I think Zboril could be a guy that you need to lean on in terms of injury on the blue line compared to some of the more green choices that the Devils have in their youth.
So the thing I take away from most PTOs is you always want to bring in competition, and with these guys, they have all that experience to bring that competition, especially with Zaboral, because now that Luke Hughes is down, he could easily see himself as he could take that spot for the first month of the season, and that would get him on a team, and if he just doesn't stick with the whole season with the Devils, he's still at the NHL level. Um, but that's what I take from this. They needed some more experience in training camp just to push some of these young guys that might not make the team out of camp from the AHL, but just give them that extra look. And another thing with the Devils going over to Czechia to start the season, they leave I believe September 29th, so they'll have 3 games that they actually need to fill with
Mm.
NHL experience. Um, so, they brought in 4 PTO guys, and you assume all 4 of them will probably be in those games unless one of those gets signed. And you brought up the name I wanted to talk about, and that's Kevin Labanc. A New York City native from Staten Island. He's got tons of experience with the San Jose Sharks, even almost putting up 60 points. You know, not that long ago. But 2 years ago, even, he was playing 73 games and he put up 33 points. I think, if he shows really good and shows that he still has the ability to play at a high level, I think you could see him make a case to be, fighting for that extra 13th man spot with a guy like Nolan Foote, and maybe even potentially be in that bottom six, because he's got the offensive talent. He just needs to show that his game is maybe more rounded than most people would think that it is.
Hmm. So I think that's an interesting one because at the depth level, excuse me, it doesn't seem like the Devils really need to go out and get forwards. But like we were just talking about with Dawson Mercer, there's really a name missing from that top six in terms of where they saw it last year. I mean, Toffoli was a guy that brought you high end scoring. Didn't exactly work out with the two meaning Toffoli and the Devils, but now that there needs to be more competition in the ranks, and I have no issue bringing in another guy. I think really these are three PTOs. I know only two of them have been have formulated, have been realized, but I think those are three that I would all absolutely pull the trigger on and at least bring in to foster some competition within the group right now. The fact that they leave at September 29th, I'm glad you brought that up. That's just less time that they have to construct the roster that they definitely want, but a more chance to see their guys in a difficult environment. And I think that that's what makes this a really, really big offseason for the Devils, not only because they went out and got a goaltender, not only because they run out and got two big name defensemen to really shore out the blue line, um, simply because this is now a massive, massive opportunity to get it right ahead of
Mhm.
a crossroads type of season. Last year fell way too short. Now this year, can they bring it back? Can they be a playoff team again? But can they set themselves apart, more importantly, from the rest of the Metropolitan Division? Can they challenge the Rangers and Hurricanes once again for the elite status in the Metropolitan? Um, Time will tell. They're going to have to prove a lot of people right and prove perhaps even more people very wrong, because there are still some doubters on the Devils. For as much hype as they're getting in the media, they're the only ones who can go out and change it. So it's early and we've got some injuries, but to close out this week, Dan, I'm going to ask you something. Name me the Metropolitan Division standings 1 through 8 at the end of the 2024-25 season.
Uh,
And I'll give you
one.
mine right at. I'll give you mine right.
You want me to go first?
Go first.
Okay.
Make me look smarter.
Um. Oh man, I don't even know. I want to. All right. I'll say I'll go.
8-1.
No, yeah. Yeah. We'll go 8-1. Okay. No offense, but Columbus 8.
Yeah.
I just don't think they have the talent. Like they have some good young players, but they just don't have the talent. I'll say 7.
Gets really hard after Columbus, honestly.
Yeah, 7. I'll go Philly. Even though
Okay.
I like Philly's future,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I think they'll have they overperformed. I feel like they overperformed their expectations last year. Like they put up 87 points. Like I don't know if they can replicate that. Maybe they come in around that, maybe like 84, 82 points type area. But then I'll go Pittsburgh at 6, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
6. The Islanders at 5, Washington 4. This is where it gets interesting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Um, I'll go Carolina 3. I'll go Devils 2, and then I'll go Rangers 1.
Mm.
I was
Yeah.
My debate was who would I put 1 and 3? Could I feel like the Devils come 2. Like I would like to say the Devils finish first, but after last year, I'm gonna need them to prove that they can get first. So I'll put them second. But my question is like goaltending for Carolina. Like I just don't know if they have it. Even though they performed very well last year, 50 wins. It's just I don't
Hmm.
know if they can push the Rangers again, especially with some of the injuries they've had this offseason. The losses they've had. They had a lot of losses.
Hmm.
Um I'm low key, I could see even Washington jumping Carolina potentially if like Washington's all of their pieces that they brought in like fit and they play to their game and Ovi, there's still Ovi and he puts up scores goals. I could
A
see
lot of
Washington.
ifs though.
Yeah, that's why I put them four. But yeah, that's what I'll go. So I'll go Rangers, Devils, Carolina, Washington, Pittsburgh, Philly. Wait, did I skip someone?
You skipped the Islanders 5,
Islanders five, Pittsburgh six, Philly
Philly
seven,
7.
Columbus eight.
Okay. All right. I think I'm gonna go 8. I'm gonna keep it with Columbus. I think that's honestly, I think 8 is probably the easiest one to guess.
Yeah.
A lot good, yeah, a lot of young players, like you said, but still too green for me to make any impact in that division. I think maybe they could sneak into 7th or 6th and build some confidence for the years forward. But in 7th, I really did like what Philly was doing. I think they punched above their weight last year, so I won't put them in 7. And I'm gonna go a little bit off script here. I'm gonna put Washington in 7. Because while
Oh,
I do think
interesting.
that I do think they have a lot to offer, I think at the end of the day, maybe I put Pittsburgh 7. No, I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna go Washington 7. Um, they were perhaps the worst playoff team I've ever seen. Last year they had no business being in the playoffs, if not for just being really in the mix of a bunch of mid teams to sneak into the Eastern Conference. Because if you look at the West, while the East really had teams who stuck out at the top, Rangers, Panthers. In the West, it was kind of like there were 10 or 11 teams who
Yeah,
were
it was
all
more
playoff
balanced. Yeah.
quality and it was more balanced. The East for me still isn't that way. And I think we're probably going to see 5 playoff teams come out of the Atlantic Division this year. So I'll go Washington 7, even though really do like Charlie Lindgren and I think that he can be a goalie for the future. I love his game. Man, okay. I'm starting to regret putting Washington as low as 7, but I'm going to stick with it. I'll go Pittsburgh 6 just because they've got the experience to at least make a push for it. They'll be in the mix for perhaps until the final 2-3 weeks of the season, and they'll make it somewhat interesting. But I think Washington will as well. So 6, I'll go Pittsburgh. 5, oof. Now it gets a little more difficult. I'm gonna go.
Ain't no way you're gonna put Philly top four. There's no
No,
way.
I'm putting
There's no
Philly
way.
5. I think well, Samuel Ersson did enough for me to say he's a starting goalie in the NHL. I don't think he's good enough to be a playoff goalie yet, especially because he'd have to do a lot of standing on his head to bring that team to the playoffs. So I'll go Philly 5, Islanders 4, and I think the Islanders are going to be the Islanders. They're going to face some form of adversity throughout the season, but they're going to be within a point or two of the playoffs until the final day of the regular season, and they're going to make it interesting. So I'll go Islanders 4th. I think Carolina had a bad offseason in terms of players that they lost. I think their blue line took a big hit, and
Seriously.
I think their bottom 6 took a big hit. The goaltending situation, while it's not elite, it's reliable enough that they'll be among the best teams in the Metro and the East still. So I'll go Carolina 3rd, and as much as it hurts me to say it, Devils 2. If they figure things out, 2nd place should be more than manageable for the roster that they have right now. And 1st place could be within sight, but like you said, Dan, they're going to have to go and prove it once again
Yeah,
because
they gotta go
last year
prove
they
it.
didn't do enough to even put themselves in a playoff conversation, which unfortunately means that um, the blue team will finish first in the Metropolitan Division. So that's all the time that we have. I won't dignify it by saying their name.
Hey, it's
That's
all
all the
right.
time we have on Puck on the Parkway. I think we got through just about everything we needed to, and hopefully we hear more news in the coming weeks about Sema Nemec, about Dawson Mercer. Hopefully good news in both those regards, and we'll see how that goes with the rookie camp, with real development camp, preseason camp just around the corner, and then PTOs for Jakobs Borrell, Michael Hutchison, and who knows, maybe Kevin LeBanc. So Dan, thank you for joining me. I've been James Burley. This has been Puck on the Parkway. Thank you so much for watching, and so long.